Imagine being cut down in the shadow of Westminster, so close to holy ground that your body ends up inside the sanctuary itself. That's what happened to one Tudor courtier in 1532. Officially, his death wasn't treated as murder. His killers claimed it was self-defense. But the aftermath reveals a far darker truth: how power, patronage, and politics could twist Tudor justice beyond recognition. I'm author and historian Claire Ridgway, and in today's Tudor True Crime, I'm taking you back to the spring of 1532. In 1532, England was tense, divided, waiting for answers. For years, Henry VIII had been wrestling with the great matter, his desperate attempt to annul his marriage to Catherine of Aragon so that he could move on and marry Anne Boleyn. By that spring, Catherine had been banished from court. Anne was queen in all but name, and Henry's relationship with his nobility, his people and the church, well, it was rather strained. In that climate, power and favour meant everything, and rivalries among the nobility could be deadly. On the 20th of April 1532, a violent confrontation broke out at Westminster. One man was left dead. Others rushed to sanctuary in a bid to escape punishment. The victim was Sir William Pennington, a Cumberland gentleman tied by marriage to Charles Brandon, Duke of Suffolk, Henry VIII's closest friend and brother-in-law. Pennington leased Suffolk's manor at Cossey in Norfolk and moved in the Duke of Suffolk's East Anglian circles. Against him stood the Southalls, Richard, Robert and Anthony, another powerful East Anglian family. Richard Southall in particular was no minor player. He was close to Thomas Cromwell, even tutoring Cromwell's son, and tied to the Howard family, Anne Boleyn's own kin. Richard Southall would later become one of the king's most loyal administrators. But in 1532, the Southall brothers were better known for their violent tempers and readiness to use force. That April day, tempers flared in Westminster Hall. Richard Southall was speaking with a gentleman, John Perriant, trying to settle certain grievances that Pennington had against him. But Pennington approached. According to historian Shannon McSheffrey, who's translated the subsequent indictment from Latin to English, it seems that Pennington accused Southall of slandering him to John Grey. Southall denied it. Pennington threatened violence if he stood by those words. Southall warned that he would retaliate. Then came the challenge. Pennington called Southall outside. If he refused, Pennington would brand him the starkest coward knave alive. The two men left the hall and summoned their entourages. Richard was joined by his brothers and at least 4 others. The men confronted each other on a bridge at the edge of Westminster Abbey's sanctuary precinct. Pennington's own servant begged him to turn back. Southall had greater numbers. Pennington replied that if the man was afraid, he could leave, but Pennington himself would press forward. John Perriant also tried to restrain Southall, warning him not to ruin himself, but Southall pushed him off. Swords were drawn. According to the indictment, Pennington struck first, piercing Southall. Southall retaliated, wounding Pennington in the face and arm. Pennington pressed his advantage, driving Southall back into a ditch. Richard Southall was down. Pennington raised his sword for the killing blow. But Anthony Southall rushed in, striking Pennington on the side of the head. It was a fatal wound, and it was struck, according to records, inside Westminster Sanctuary. Now you'd think that killing a courtier tied to the Duke of Suffolk and on holy ground would bring swift punishment. But this was Tudor England. Justice didn't work as we expect today. The indictment didn't even use the word murder. Instead, it stated that Anthony Southall feloniously slew and killed William Pennington against the Lord King's peace and his crown and dignity. That was the official line, but Venetian ambassador Carlo Capello offered another. He reported, "One of the chief gentlemen in the service of the Duke of Norfolk with 20 followers assaulted and killed in the sanctuary of Westminster Sir William Pennington, kinsman of the Duke of Suffolk. It is said to have been caused by a private quarrel, but I am assured it was owing to opprobrious language uttered against Madam Anne Boleyn, by His Majesty's sister, the Duchess of Suffolk." In other words, Capello believed that this wasn't a private feud at all, but factional politics. Suffolk and his wife, Mary Tudor, the King's sister and the Dowager Queen of France, had insulted Anne Boleyn. And the Southells, allied to the Howards, struck back. And it was Richard Southwell who'd started the violence. McSheffrey points out that Capello may have been repeating gossip, but the reactions afterwards suggest that he wasn't far off the truth. Suffolk himself was furious yet cautious. He wrote to Cromwell that summer denying rumours that his servants had sworn vengeance on the Southells. Why so careful? Well, because if the killing had been linked to his wife's insult to Anne Boleyn, Suffolk's own position would be rather precarious. Even Pennington's widow, Frances, made no move to prosecute the Southells privately. After her husband's death, she lived in Suffolk's household, and her son later joined Suffolk's retinue. Likely Suffolk offered her protection in return for her letting sleeping dogs lie. But what of the Southells? Well, after the killing, they rushed into Westminster Abbey and claimed sanctuary. Now here's how it's supposed to work, and thank you to Shannon McSheffrey for explaining it in her article, The Slaying of Sir William Pennington, Legal Narrative and the Late Medieval English Archive. In sanctuary, a man admitted to a felony, swore an oath before the abbot's representative, and was entered into the register. From then on, he was a sanctuary man, safe from arrest as long as he stayed within the precinct. Now, sanctuary was often used as a bolt hole. Gentlemen could wait there while patrons arranged a pardon for them. It was safer than hiding in the open and more comfortable than rotting in prison, or worse. That's what the Southells did. But here's the twist. By the rules, you couldn't claim sanctuary in the very place that you'd committed the crime. Yet Pennington had been killed inside Westminster's own precinct. Even so, the Southells were allowed to remain. Cromwell himself, on the King's orders, had prevented Suffolk from dragging them out. In the summer of 1532, the Southells were tried. The killing was presented not as murder, but as self-defence, manslaughter. According to the court, Pennington had initiated the violence and the Southells had defended themselves. Richard Southwell purchased a pardon, paying £1,000 and surrendering 2 manors to the king. Parliament ratified the pardon in 1534. Southwell may have got away with murder, but he bore the scars from Pennington's blows. In 1537, Hans Holbein the Younger sketched and painted Richard Southwell. In both the sketch and the portrait, a scar is visible on his neck and perhaps another on his forehead. As historian Shannon McSheffrey notes, Holbein could easily have painted him from the other side to hide the scars, but he didn't. Was Southwell proud of them, treating them as marks of honour or proof of survival? Well, it's impossible to know. He may have been marked physically, but remarkably, Richard Southwell's career did not collapse. He went on to serve as Sheriff of Norfolk and Suffolk. He was knighted in 1540 and became General Surveyor of the King's lands. He sat in Parliament, carried out diplomatic missions, served in military campaigns, and was even remembered in Henry VIII's will with a bequest of £200 as a token of special love and favour. And he was chosen as an executor of the King's will. In late 1546, he betrayed his former ally, Henry Howard, Earl of Surrey, providing the evidence that condemned him to the block. Under Edward VI, he faltered due to his conservative Catholic faith, even spending time in the Tower for writing seditious bills. But when Mary I launched her fight for the throne in 1553 against Lady Jane Grey, or Queen Jane, Southwell rode to her aid with men, supplies and money. She rewarded him with a Privy Council seat and the office of Master of the Ordnance. By Elizabeth I's reign, his influence had faded. He retired to his Norfolk estates, dying in 1564 as one of the wealthiest men in the county, owner of more than 30 manors. It's astonishing to think that a man who struck down another man, William Pennington, in cold blood, ended his life rich, honoured and secure. So the murder of Sir William Pennington shows us the darker side of Tudor justice, a world where power and connections mattered more than the truth. What do you think? In Henry VIII's England, could you really get away with murder? I think so. Thank you for joining me. I'll see you very soon. Bye bye.